We are now live in a few
Oh my
seconds.
God, we are back.
Yeah,
back,
yeah, oh yeah. So, yeah, be back again immediately after you've already delayed
My
us.
cat's on fire. I gotta walk my fish.
Oh,
I delayed us.
Yeah, you delayed us, Angeels.
What do you mean?
Okay, it was all
It
you.
wasn't me though. It wasn't the last person to turn up.
I think it was like mostly Teapot.
Wait,
Yeah,
I was like, I see that we're live now, but I was like 5 minutes late, and then we started like
okay,
20
so
minutes late. So that's pretty ridiculous.
We start the recording now, right?
Yes.
No,
recording?
we're
Yeah,
not live
okay.
yet.
We
No,
are
we're not
live.
yet.
Wait,
No,
wait.
Well, no,
You can keep on talking about all your favorite
live.
animes. It's okay, we're not live yet.
Wait, I thought this was the anime tea time. Like that's why Angeels is here, right?
Yeah.
I'm here like
Angels-
I'm here as like the counterpoint.
I've seen the Twitch clip where we
Wait, what
talked
clip?
about Angels watching a lot of anime.
No, that's true, actually. You know,
That's so
I've
cute.
seen that as well. I have
So
seen that, dude,
cute.
to be fair.
No, you
So
haven't.
you're in trouble. But anyway, enough about anime, at least for a while. Welcome to a very, very special edition of Tea Time. We are here to talk about competitive balance, and with us, we have, of course, Angeels from PvP, Roy from World vs. World, and a very, very special guest indeed. It is CMC, all the way from ArenaNet. Welcome to the show.
From ArenaNet.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's so
wait,
cool.
where's
That's
that?
the company that makes Guild Wars too.
Yeah.
Wait,
Whoa,
really?
It's crazy.
That's true. Yeah, that is actually accurate. But
You know, I wouldn't. If you'd said from anything, like if you'd said from Weebland or something, I would have believed you there.
yeah. Oh, you would have
Is
believed
that?
that?
Oh, that's a real place, Angels, that you
Yeah.
go
Weebland.
to.
Okay.
Weebland, yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's a little bit. That's too much tryharding right there, boys. Okay. Let's get into it. The reason for this tea time is, it's a while back we had a massive balance patch, and a lot of memes came out of that. A lot about Thanos snapping of builds, all that sort of thing. And so I suppose the first question that I'd like to posit, and the first topic for discussion, would be the overall balance philosophy for Guild Wars 2. Like, where are we going in the future? Are we going a little bit more power, a little bit less power, a bit in between? Like, what are some of the things that we as the players, and also you as from a developer standpoint, what are you looking out for in the skill design of the game in a competitive setting?
Well, obviously, one of the big goals of the big February patch was to bring damage down, because it was definitely a little bit too high. You'd see people getting one shot, not necessarily from one skill, just like very quickly dying, which is bad for learning the game and kind of bad for gameplay as well, because you just want to have a better understanding of what is actually happening in your fights. And I think we got damage into a pretty okay spot with the patch. Obviously, there's going to be some outliers, and we touched a couple of those already, and there's going to be more outliers that we need to fix even more. But from here, I think bringing down sustain a little bit more, especially on some of the tankier builds, is probably one of the higher priorities. Finding the balance between damage and sustain is really what drives the gameplay. If we get too tanky, then we have hot meta with Chrono Bunker, and that is actually unplayable, and no one wants to see that. If we go too far in the other direction, even if damage is lower, if no one can heal at all, then you're just going to get whittled down and die, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. So we want to make sure we have a pretty good balance between the two of those. And that's probably kind of one of the main focuses moving forward right now.
Okay. And so I kind of come almost in a bit of a tangent there. What about stuff like control effects in particular? So we saw a big reduction in stun breaks and some mobility of a lot of professions and specializations in the previous patch, but not so much in the way of actual crowd control. There's still quite a lot of stunning, knocking down, all that sort of thing. I'm looking at you, Tornado. And yeah.
Strong skill.
Is that something that is probably going to be addressed in the future? Is that something that's on the menu to make these control effects feel very impactful and a key part of kind of locking this down in the gameplay there as well?
Absolutely. I think for the February patch, CC effects was one of the things that we kind of hedged a little bit too powerful, because it is kind of one of the equalizers to prevent sustain builds from taking over. Like if you look at way back in the day, Dagger Ellie is most broken spec by a mile, but it was playing like Armor of Earth as the one stun break, then you had Lightning Flash. So you could totally get locked down and die from like a Hambo chain into the team piling on. And like that's something that kept Ellie in check back then. It's something that we kind of left in a pretty strong state to make sure that, or not make sure, but try to help keep sustain builds down. And it's definitely something that is likely going to be adjusted in the future to be a little bit less prevalent, whether that happens on cooldowns or potentially something I brought up before is that talking about the skills team a lot as to what skills necessarily need or don't need to have CC anymore, because there are quite a few of the skills, and we don't want to bump the cooldowns too high so it feels bad, but we want to make sure there's enough. We don't want to feel like you're 100-0'd in the CC chain either. Although I think reducing the damage on those helped quite a bit in that sense. There's definitely a lot more to evaluate on the CC side.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Would you ever consider, or have you ever thought about putting any sort of like diminishing return on CCs?
I mean, it's something that comes up, but it's kind of hard to read, and it's not something I'd say is too high on the list of likely to happen, but it's something that's talked about.
Okay.
I think that it seems like the approach is more kind of moderating the balance between stun breaks, evasion, and crowd control, as opposed to kind of needing to implement a diminishing return system there as well. I imagine Roy was kind of talking perhaps more from a world versus world standpoint there, potentially, because in that situation, there's a lot more CC. Is that maybe something you'd be talking about?
I would say I was probably thinking more about PvP, just because in world versus world, you're usually, in terms of fights, you're generally going to be organized with groups, and you should have stability access if you're playing organized, where you don't always have it in PvP. So no, I was actually talking more about a PvP standpoint, I'd say,
okay,
world versus world in that regard. But I think that before Stab originally got changed, stability was too strong. Before it was made into stacks, and so I think it's actually, I don't think, in a terrible place in terms of stability versus CCs. I mean, obviously CMC, I don't know how he feels about it, but in terms of world versus world, I think stability versus CCs is actually not in a terrible place. But
how do you feel about the internal cooldown on stability stack removal?
Is it 0.75?
0.75.
Yeah. I think it's pretty good, because when it first got changed, there wasn't an internal cooldown, I think, right? And then I believe it went to like either it was 0.5 or they made it or you guys made it 0.75. I don't remember. I think it's pretty good.
I think the issue with
the
interval is the fact that strips and like corrupts kind of like completely bypass that.
Right.
And that is a big issue in itself, because you just see your stability go, and then you're perma CC'd from there on.
Stab versus CCs alone, I think, is what it is. I think when you start bringing in all the corruptions and whatnot, wins, which we can get into, is certainly it's a different situation entirely. And of course, stability as alone is another issue, which I don't know if we're going to get into world versus world yet, or if we want to talk about other stuff first. That's another topic, but maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here. So I know we have a little bit of an order.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I don't necessarily mind, but I thought I was probably going to tackle PvP first and then move on to world versus world.
I'll just, I'm going to go
get
work out. I'll see you guys.
Yeah. Just get the hell out of here, man. What are you even doing here? And so the kind of one thing more of almost like a generality than kind of leading on from the CC thing. And I think you've already talked a little bit about the CMC actually. But so, basically every CC ability does 3 damage now. Quite funny, but also a little bit
some
sad.
of them do like 10 damage. It still scales with power. Come on.
I have 9 on staff 5, so it's broken.
And some gadgets do full damage, which is very exciting.
That
is
very, very true. But I think
that one is getting fixed.
Yeah.
Didn't we fix that with?
Wait, what is getting fixed?
I thought I fixed throw mine.
The throw
either
mine.
in the last batch or it's the next batch.
Cool. Wow.
Gadgeteer with gadget skills. If you run both, they have the old damage values for those who are unaware. Which results in some good memes with throw mine.
Throw mine, dude.
Sorry, I just missed that. What was it? I'm reading chat as well. It's difficult.
Yeah. But kind of
what was the last thing?
Yeah.
Oh, he was just reiterating what you said about Gadget being.
Yeah.
I missed it too. It's okay. I'm also out of my element here. It's fine.
But on this note, we saw that CC and damage, it's gone. Is that something that is going to be continuing, or will this kind of be continually adjusted? So crowd control abilities might end up doing more damage, particularly on some of them if they're very, very telegraphed, or slower ones, or maybe elite skills like Prime Light Beam, for example, on Holosmith, right? Not doing much damage, a bit sad. But
it's very sad.
Is this going to continue, or will it slowly be adjusted to the point where there'll be a balance, right? You won't be getting one shot by a CC, but it might end up doing some damage as well, because I think that some abilities feel almost a bit weird, like you're whacking someone with a mace over the head, and 13 damage, right? That's good, right? But I suppose ultimately that doesn't matter in the for the role play context. But yeah, like what's going to be the approach with crowd control and damage going forward into the future patches?
Yeah, I mean, flavor will suffer a little bit for the sake of balance. Obviously, not all cases the 0.01 makes sense. We talked about this a little bit before, but some of the bigger skills, Prime Light Beam, Executioner's Scythe, Big Ol' Bomb probably, makes sense for these to do a little bit of damage. I mean, not 0.01, but not 2.0, maybe like 0.75, 1.0 range. Alternatively, they could just not CC anymore, and this is kind of like a case-by-case thing that we want to evaluate. And it's something we'll have to evaluate game-wide, obviously. But if nothing gets CC removed, I would expect some of the bigger, highly telegraphed kind of key moment CC skills to probably get a little bit of damage back. It's just something that we baseline for the February patch. It's a lot easier to do that than evaluate every single skill, which is something that is worth doing, as shown by the feedback on a lot of the big skills. But wasn't something we had time to do for that update, because there was already a lot of changes happening. And so we kind of baseline everything and we'll reevaluate.
Okay.
On the topic of CC skills, just like a couple of specifics, obviously we had a lot, pretty much all the CC skills, as Teapot mentioned, almost all of them got, the damage pretty much reduced down to, as you said, not 0.0, or a 1 rather. And a couple of them also had additional changes, like Staff 5 and Overcharge Shot specifically. Now there's a wind up on them, and Overcharge Shot still has the self knockback. And it seems very punishing to use those skills when they don't still they do no damage. Obviously they still CC, but Overcharge Shot specifically CCing yourself for just the CC, and Staff 5 now very, very difficult to hit, and it still does no damage if you hit it. Are you looking at those skills at all? Are you thinking of maybe taking away those wind ups or whatever, or giving them something in return for those?
Yeah, well, I think the wind up is pretty necessary. We need to make sure that these skills are reactable. Like the problem we have with Overcharge Shot Staff 5 4 is that they just happen. You would get CC, hard CC coming out with no counterplay is a big problem in the game, I think.
Sure.
And we tried to adjust that in a lot of places where we could. And I mean, Overcharge Shot does feel a little bit weird with the wind up plus self CC, and that's I won't disagree with that. So there are things that we can look at, obviously.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think the cast time is important. We need to make sure.
I'd agree. The cast times are important.
That's certainly true. And I think this is something that the previous patch really actually helped address. Is this kind of feeling of being overwhelmed and immediately pulverized into dirt that a lot of especially new players found coming into the game. I'd say adding a lot of telegraphs, making these abilities easier to react to and play around is very very, very important indeed. And of course, like we were just talking about game-wide stuff, right? And don't worry, we're not going to go there. But what is there kind of a plan for classes that might not necessarily, or I should say, elite specializations rather, or specializations that don't really fit within like a PvP context, and I won't say Scourge here because that might upset a few people, but what I will say is Renegade, right? Like Renegade is a bit of a weird one, right? When like the class is just puts down massive spirits that cover the entire point. Is there a kind of a plan to or some kind of idea to make this work within the PvP context, or do you just Give it the old smiter's boon and make sure it just doesn't exist.
I mean, Smiter's boon is obviously a very uncommon thing. It's not something we want to do a lot, and we did it a little bit in the February patch, but would rather avoid it as much as possible. And I think something like Renegade, you have a lot of options to balance it. Like, we can make the spirits have less HP, you can adjust the damage, you can adjust a ton of things on Renegade. Like, you can also CC the spirits, which is not necessarily a great play, but it is like a last-ditch option if you really need to. Obviously, they're a little bit harder to kill with the damage coming down, and it's something that could be worth looking at. But I think Renegade in particular is balanceable within the PvP mode. And I think that's true for pretty much every elite spec. I don't think there's any that are not really balanceable. Some of them are more difficult than others, but...
So when you say balanceable, do you mean like skill split?
With skill splits, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
You sort of touched upon this, but in general, how do you feel about bunkers, like bunker classes and PvP and stuff? I mean, do you think that they're healthy for the game mode? At obviously, not Chrono Season 1, of course, but at a certain level, or would you rather, do you think that they shouldn't really exist as much, or in terms of Conquest?
No, I think bunkers definitely fill a role in Conquest, and they shouldn't be obviously on the level of Season 1 Chrono. But looking back into old metas where you have like Bunker Guard as a solid support option, I mean, it's a strategy that makes sense, more team fight oriented as opposed to having a bunch of roamers. Back in the day, we had the Selly meta versus some people were still trying to run Bunker Guard at the time, even though it wasn't really comparable, but just because of how strong like Selly Ellie and Selly Angie were. But it would be nice to see a balance between the team fight plus bunker support and the more bruisery roamer comps for sure.
Okay. Just to kind of add on that though, there's a lot of teams. We just saw in the last monthly AT. There are teams and team comps sometimes that run multiple bunker builds, and it seems very, very even if they're not at a level as Season 1 Chrono. It's still not a very fun comp to play against. And I mean, do you have any sort of plans to try and split bunkers up at all, make it so that if you're stacking bunker builds, bunker classes, it punishes you in any way, or do you think it's fine as it is?
I mean, that's really the balance that comes down to how tanky should a bunker build be. I'm more inclined to see like a little bit squishier support style bunker than like the full tank do nothing side noter that doesn't really do anything or die. And that's balancing defense against damage is always going to be like the most difficult part, I think, of balancing this game. Is making sure that it feels good, but also allowing those builds to exist and not be oppressive.
Cool.
Yeah, I think and well, I imagine you don't specifically have a vision for like an ideal meta or ideal playstyle. I imagine the goal is to kind of enable what the players can come up with, right? Maybe that works, maybe this works, right? With a different variety of styles. So I imagine that you are not looking to just annihilate a specific type of build unless it's obviously completely degenerate and shouldn't be allowed to exist.
Oh, absolutely. We don't want to try to enforce any particular meta. We want to make as many things playable as possible so that players have the option to experiment with different compositions.
Yeah, so just in the hypothetical realm, right? Like the ideal would be to have all 27 variants of the professions to be viable, right? Would be the word here, right? So you could play anything you'd really wanted to, and something, some kind of build would work, right? Whether it's a roam or a team fighter or a bunker class, right? Or anything like that. We want all of these specializations to at least have a place in the game. Like I imagine, obviously, mostly in ranked and potentially even in high level competitive as well.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great to see at least one viable build for every elite spec / and core spec as well. Potentially even more than one.
Oh.
On the topic of essentially making everything viable, how do you sort of approach having certain like specific specializations fill specific roles? You know, as opposed to basically, you know, the original, at least I think the original design philosophy of everything kind of does everything. You know, how do you feel about a class being just a bunker class or a class just doing damage or something? You know, is that kind of how you approach balancing a class? You know, like let's say you're looking at Core Ranger, are you like, okay, this is a damage class, or do you kind of, you know, try and balance everything more so that it's just good at things, which isn't very specific, but
no, I understand what you're saying. Obviously, like some professions or some elite specializations are going to be more designed toward doing a particular thing, and so at least making sure that whatever it is aspect of the class is viable is a good starting point. But then if you look at something like Core Ranger, a lot of the core specs were designed without the idea of elite specializations. They do try to do more things,
right?
And I mean, it obviously depends on what these are, because like if you look at Core Ranger, you can look at spirits, which were a big thing back in the day, but maybe we don't necessarily want spirits to be as powerful as they once were. So that does create a problem in terms of making that viable, but at the same time, we need to make sure that the game mode doesn't suffer as a result of trying to make things better.
Yeah,
absolutely. Question I'd ask is do you want to try and see like core specs and elite specs sort of on the same level, or do you want there to be like that almost bridge between them? Because obviously if you make a lot of core specs very strong, then that could be quite problematic when coupled with elite specializations at the same time.
Yeah, the balance between core and elite specs is obviously very difficult, because anything you give to a core spec can also be taken by an elite spec. But we've also seen cases where core specs are better and or at least viable, and it's usually when you have like 3 really good trait lines that you want to take from the core spec, and then you can't actually afford to go into the elite specialization. And then the elite spec taking the elite spec plus 2 of those trait lines is actually less effective, which is really difficult to do, honestly, especially with splits. That's more of a thing to do on the actual design side with how trait lines are designed and what they enable. But it would be nice to see core specs viable without blowing out elite specs, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's a very, very difficult problem.
Yeah, absolutely. You do see issues like that where almost like entire classes kind of revolve around a certain trait line, and if you nerf the trait line that's kind of problematic in the core, it just kind of deletes the elite specialization as well. But I suppose that with that sort of thing, you maybe have to kind of like bite the bullet to a certain extent, right? And like kind of get rid of the problematic trait line and then readjust the elite specialization as well, right? And that's maybe where some kind of like redesigns come in, because we've seen some like reworks, right? Like tactics with Warrior has been reworked a lot there as well. Like Shadow Art's got a rework as well. So explosives, of course, the very recent one as well on Engineer getting reworked as well. Like is this Death Magic as well? Like, is this kind of rework and what the trait lines look like now, like having quite a strong identity, almost having a bit of a central mechanic around it, the explosive entrance, right, on Engineer, then these Death's Carapace stack? Is that something that's looking to be extended across more trait lines, or maybe even all of the trait lines with these classes?
I couldn't really tell you one way or the other. That all of those trait lines were redone by Robert, who's actually, I think he did a really good job with all of those. It feels really good to have a kind of centralizing mechanic, and I mean, we kind of overstepped a little bit with Death Magic probably initially, and it's a little bit better now, but maybe a little bit overtuned, But I think those trait lines feel really good. Their strength is obviously something we need to balance, but I think they worked out pretty well.
Yeah. And I think that is, I do like the way the design ends up going, because it almost feels like these core specializations are a little bit like elite specializations to a certain extent.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
They have this kind of centralized mechanic and all the other traits bounce off. I think that's really cool, right? You feel a lot of customization almost, right? It feels like
you're actually specializing into something.
Yeah, it's a really cool design, and I hope to see that sort of thing coming on there, coming along there as well when we have these core specs coming into the mix there as well. But there is another side of something like this actually. This is something that I think Angeels wanted to bring up, and it was Do you want to do this one then?
So, what do you feel about like certain trait lines being necessary for PvP builds? Like alchemy on engineer, just being so necessary because like the elixirs and the associated traits are so good. Or trickery on thief. Like, do you feel that's problematic for like long-term balancing in PvP? Because like they're the class is just so reliant on them.
I mean, it's good and bad. I guess it's not really good, but it is not necessarily a problem. I mean, ideally, you would choose from all of the options and not be locked into anything in particular. But just because of how specialized you get in competitive game modes, it's not surprising that there are trait lines that are kind of seen as a requirement. But at the same time, this is kind of something that you can grow out of as the game evolves. Like if you look at 5 years ago, I would tell you that water or trait line on Ellie would be required at all times, and that's not really true anymore. Because we gave some Condi cleansing to fire, we gave some more power, and then like Weaver's base defense kind of offset the need for water as much. So it's not a mandatory requirement, it's still very good. I think there's room to maneuver, but I don't have a huge problem with a single trait line being quote unquote necessary for a competitive mode. It would be nice if that wasn't the case, but it's not a huge problem. If we see multiple trait lines being a requirement such that all the builds look the same, that's more of a problem. But there's still a lot of diversity between different thief builds, even if they all take trickery.
Okay. And kind of almost like another thing with regards to the philosophy of the balance. We now have kind of like permanent ranked, right? We have our ranked season, then we have our unranked season as well, or rather, the mini season as it is now referred to, and that will have a different type of PvP, whether that be a 2v2 or 3v3 or a like 5v5 deathmatch or 50, whatever it's going to be.
15v15.
50, exactly. 50. Here we go, right?
I had to. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Is there going to be some balancing kind of in that direction as well? Because I think, with the 2v2, you did see some very dominant duos ending up kind of popping up in the rank there. Or is it still going to be a focus on the main competitive game mode, which is 5 versus 5, particularly automated tournament, 5v5 competitive gameplay?
Yeah. It's another difficult problem. We don't really want to balance for an alternate game mode. It's going to be the case sometimes that we can adjust things that are overperforming in, say, 2v2 because they're also overperforming in Conquest, but we're not going to focus on fixing problems in 2v2 just because they exist only in 2v2. We have discussed many season length given that, because I think the 1 month for 2v2, given that there wasn't a whole lot of balance considerations going on, kind of ended up being a slog at the end. So that's something that we're definitely looking at. But we're definitely focusing balance on 5v5.
Okay, cool. And another thing about the targeted balance would be ranked versus ATs as well, but also about kind of stuff that happens in kind of like medium level, like lower level games versus the high level stuff, right? I think the class that springs to mind that is the terror of perhaps like the middle league players is stuff like Reaper, Necromancer in general is quite a bit of a brick wall, I think, if players are not too aware of how to deal with it, where it's less of an issue with stuff like monthly ATs, right? It's not Reaper is not the end of the world there. It's not bad, right? But it's less of a problem. What is going to be the approach with handling that sort of stuff to kind of keep all the players happy, or is that even possible? I mean, I don't think it is, but good luck, I guess.
It depends on your definition of possible, I guess. Like, obviously, if anything's overperforming in any particular aspect, whether it's tournaments or ranked, or even things that are just like pub stompy, super good in low MMR, but not super relevant in high MMR, but anything that makes a bad gameplay experience is something that we want to fix.
Okay.
And it's going to have a rippling effect across the other aspects of the game, and we need to reevaluate everything. So, like, if we nerf something because it's overperforming in ATs, and now it's garbage in ranked, then it's like, okay, how can we bring this back up in a way such that it's not overperforming in ATs, but still a viable option? And, I mean, there is a worst case where it's just super unhealthy to the point that we don't necessarily want it to be viable, and that's something I'd rather do less often, but it is something that's an option for sure.
Okay. And here's an interesting meme, and this might be a bit of a hot topic. We've got into some debate action here as well.
Okay.
What do you guys think? What do you guys think about active revival?
My favorite. So good.
do you want to talk a little bit about that, Angeels? Some active revival action?
Well, so in my opinion, okay, and I've got to be careful how I phrase this. The balance team, okay, before kind of the whole like CMC took charge of PvP and everything.
Oh no.
They just said that they wanted revives to be more active, okay, using skills and whatnot. And I think this has utterly ruined the actual risk of revival in PvP. Because, casting Signet and then just running away out of LOS with it, there's no risk to that. Just like there's no risk running up and, tossing an Elixir R down on down state and instantly rezzing someone, or yourself for that matter. So I think that kind of gameplay actually takes away something from PvP, because you've worked hard to get a kill and then you've kind of had that effort taken away from you. Because someone has a very strong and very... I feel that the Geyser trait nerf was a very good direction. Small boost to rezzing, but nothing massive. So yeah, I guess that's my spiel about it. I think it just takes something away.
So I think there are numbers that exist for these skills that make them feel okay. I'm not saying that that's the current state of them. But at the same time, like if I'm taking Signet of Undeath or I'm taking Signet of Mercy, I'm taking War Banner, no one plays War Banner, I know this, but it's an example from back in the day. You are giving up some combat ability to take that. So like it is more likely that you're going to lose a fight, and you're then kind of hedging against that by saying, okay, I'm going to have a stronger res. But at the same time, then if you have really good awareness, like you have your Thief, keeping an eye on this res, you're going to get headshotted every time, you're going to get stolen, you're going to get that interrupted, and then the stomp's going to go through, and then you're going to lose the fight, and you're going to be down a skill, and you're going to, like, I don't think it's as game ruining necessarily as you paint it, but it's possible. I would say that is, some of these skills may be overtuned a little bit, but the gameplay around them is not necessarily bad. It's just you need to be more coordinated with how you're securing stomps, which is obviously difficult in ranked, but
just play better.
Yeah, I'd argue that's where the biggest issue is in ranked specifically.
Yeah, and I think like these skills are things that we can look at for sure. But sacrificing in general, like sacrificing a utility skill that does not give you combat value for a revive skill is an interesting trade-off, and I think there are numbers of these skills working.
I actually like res gameplay. I think it adds a level to the game, and I don't think Angel was saying he doesn't, but I don't know. I think it's in a much better place than it was before as well. Like the Geyser trait was definitely overtuned. I think maybe Blood Res is a little strong, but I think a lot of the downside abilities or res abilities right now, I think do have some sort of counterplay. Like CMC said, like you can interrupt the Signet, and again, obviously it's a trade-off because you have to take the utility off, and especially on Firebrand and ranked, where I think it's arguably a pretty easy target in a lot of ways for team fights. Losing a utility is pretty big on Guardian. It makes it all harder to survive. So I wouldn't say it's perfect, obviously, but I think it's in an all right space, personally.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe there's a distinction between like the insta-reses like Signet and then the passive traits like a passive Blood
I'd say the passives are probably a bit more overtuned.
But a lot of these fields are very large and they proc right when you start rezzing. so you get like the instant bonus off of them as well. And there's not really a lot of counterplay. Like you could say that you could knock the player out of the passive blood well, but the radii of these skills is just so large that you don't have an option to do that really.
Yeah, it's not always going to be ideal, obviously, for sure.
Yeah, I think the traits are more of a problem for sure, and we hit most of them out at 1% ticks. I think we actually missed the blood trait for some reason, and it's still at 4%, which is not intended. But I would rather like the pulse revive not be impactful there, but dropping a geyser to heal myself while I res is an interesting trait. But when that geyser also revives the player, I think it's more problematic. So you can expect a change to make well blood res 1%.
Yeah.
At some point in time, but
all right.
Yeah.
Blood dead
on those traits.
One thing I would say is that in a lot of maybe this is okay, but even in ATs, even in some high level games in the ATs, you do see that the fight will just swing, right? As soon as the res comes through, you'll have an elementalist get a glyph, right? A tempest get a glyph, or a firebrand. You don't typically see it on firebrand so much, actually. It's more tempest you see doing it these days, actually, with the glyph of renewal, and then it just immediately swings the fight, and it's just like, I think that kind of feels pretty bad if you're playing as the enemy team, I guess, like, particularly if you don't have something like a thief that can kind of play into it pretty easily, because it can be quite difficult to interrupt, especially when the LE can just run away or stuff like that. I'm not really sure what the approach is there to balance that exactly. Or maybe that's fine. I don't know. I can certainly see a little bit of frustration coming out there. As well, we're dealing with something like that, with like the instant revival, particularly when it's combined with a powerful effect like teleporting them to you or rezzing them on full health, or something like that as well. But hey, what do you guys think about that?
I guess like the way, maybe like what you kind of, I don't know, another way to reiterate that would be like taking that res ability as opposed to not taking that res ability is almost always more valuable, is maybe what you're saying. Because like we were just casting an AT I think last week. And we saw, team fights happening between two teams, and one team had an LE. Well, both teams had an LE. One had a glyph res, and one didn't. And the team with the glyph res, they usually had a downstate first, and they always got the glyph res off, and then always won the team fight. So, maybe is there more trade-offs you can have? Is that what you're saying, for taking those abilities? Or, maybe it's a little bit always too powerful.
To a certain extent, yeah. That's probably where I would go on here. Oh. Wait.
Right.
Wait, Roy. Oh, wait. He's gone.
Whoa, no, I'm Roy.
Whoa, it's time to signet him, boys.
Yeah, we got to get a signet onto Roy there. Let's go. Oh, he's back.
Oh, he's back.
Wow, I guess someone really didn't like what I just had to say.
Yeah, he got thrown out. He got thrown out of here, man.
I'm done.
Yeah, you are done. You are absolutely done. Right there as well. But, I don't know. Let's see. I guess that's kind of all that then with the res stuff. That's basically all we can go. Who knows what's going on there, guys? I don't know what's going on. I didn't
even know there was downstate in this game, to be honest with you, until just now. So.
I think we should remove the
downstate. Level 5 yet?
Yeah.
Well, I've never gone down.
He never dies. He never dies there, as well. But let's kind of switch the gears up a little bit here, and let's talk a lot. You know what, Roy? Your time to shine. Let's talk about World versus World. What have you got for us?
A couple other things before that, like the general stuff we didn't really touch. I don't know. Did you want to get to that?
Oh, I think we can do like the general stuff towards the end. Actually, let's do all the balance stuff now. Let's do some World versus World, man. Tell us about
I got one word
World,
for you, CMC. I don't know. Can you guess what it is?
One word?
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
World versus World. Yeah. Well, it's technically a 3-word skill, but.
Oh, okay. Well, then it's trivial to get the answer.
Wins a disenchantment. How do you feel about that skill?
It's a powerful skill.
It's a very powerful skill. In fact, it's kind of shaped the World versus World meta for, I think, since POF release after several iterations.
True.
Yeah. It seems as though wins, among other things, but wins at the top, the forefront, has kind of become the single most oppressive skill in World versus World. Completely controls fights. And it, oh yeah, sorry for EU players, bubbles, excuse me, my bad. Or domes. Skill's called Winds of Disenchantment. Anyways.
Does anyone actually say dome?
Yes, I've heard you.
Like bubble is the correct.
Fat domes on the stack, dude. Anyways, it seems as though the skill the effect that the skill has, its size, the fact that now it can be channeled and move, and then of course its unique ability that you cannot reapply boons. Obviously it's an elite skill, but even on a 90-second cooldown, it seems as though as a skill it is more impactful and stronger than almost any other skill I think in the existence of the game in terms of world versus world, and the meta around fights. There's just nothing that I think really comes close to it. I mean, it obviously has been nerfed, and changed several times, and I think it's in a better place than it has been before. But it still seems like it is too strong, too oppressive, and completely controls fights. And it has been since the game or POF has released. And do you have any thoughts on it? Are you planning to maybe change it?
Roy's just ranting here.
Yeah, I just wanted to get you.
He just wanted to get it off his chest.
What
man.
were you thinking?
Yeah,
oh my god!
Start flaming, going crazy.
I mean, bubble is a tough problem for sure. At least looking at it from a skills book side of things, there aren't a lot of knobs to turn. Obviously, we reduce the target cap with the February patch, which helps a little bit. Obviously, it's not really going to solve the problem. We get bumped with the cooldown, which just makes it less common that you have such a powerful skill. These are things that are possibilities that don't really do anything. I think to resolve as big of an issue as the skill is in World vs. World, it's probably going to be on a non-split. And I mean, wins is a skill that we talk about internally every so often. And something I should probably bring up again, because I think there's probably a solution there. It's just not an easy solution to do with numbers changes.
I guess sort of on a slight tangent here. I feel like some of these skills, like wins specifically, suffer from like either being really good or kind of not really worth taking. When you come across that, like in the case of balancing, what sort of choices do you have? Do you either go like full like Smiter's Boon, making it useless in effect, or how do you kind of approach that problem of a skill just being too strong or kind of not worth taking outside of that?
Yeah, I mean, Smiter's Boon is the kind of last resort option, and something that we want to avoid as much as possible, especially for something like a specialization defining elite skill. Like, I feel like Winds of Disenchantment is something that we want to be playable. We don't want to just destroy the skill, and so it's something that we do need to reevaluate. If there's not a good numbers change, it's something that we should probably look at the impact it's having and look at how we can adjust the skill such that it is still playable, because it is like defining Spellbreaker elite. I lean toward making things viable as before destroying them. If it's not possible, well, I wouldn't say something's not possible for a while. There's a lot of room for iteration. There's a lot of room to try things before going the Smiter's Boon route.
More in the kind of maybe temporary Smiter's Boon and then eventual redesign, right? Yeah. If anything, right? And then rework the skill into something
definitely
else.
An option.
Definitely. Do you think that the effect that it has, again, the unique effect where you can't reapply boons, do you think that's too strong for World vs. World, or do you think that effect in it of itself is okay?
These are tough questions, Ru.
I think, personally, I think the effect is interesting, and it's something that can exist. It's super powerful, obviously, but at the same time, it's a big cooldown. You have that channel. It's possible to interrupt. Obviously, in Wovoid, it's more difficult to target specifically one person when there are many people running on top of each other to get that interrupt. So that's not necessarily a big counterplay that we want. But there is introducing some way to counterplay wins is probably would be good. I don't have a huge problem with no boon application. Like, I think it's really powerful, but I think powerful effects are interesting, just to make sure that they don't ruin the game, right?
For sure. In terms of like the whole interrupting it, This is something that's been brought up a lot, and it has more to do with outnumbered fighting. But certainly now, this originally the skill was a stationary wind or bubble, whatever. You'd place it, it would go down, and it would last for 10 seconds. I don't know if it was ever stationary with when it lasted for 5 seconds or not, but now that it's channelable, yeah, obviously you can interrupt the warrior, and especially now that the passive stability trait, that could even be arguably easier. But when you have situations where if you're playing Ruthless World as an organized group or just whatever, and you're fighting people that either have a lot more spell breakers or they're just bigger than you, they can just run at you with a ton of warriors. And again, because the fact that it's channelable, it's going to be a lot harder to do that. And would you ever think about maybe putting it back to being stationary? And obviously again, any sort of like, you can only be affected by one winds at a time or whatever, or there's a, again, if you get hit by winds, then you have a few seconds after leaving it where you can't be hit by another winds, something like that. Whereas that, I mean, obviously I don't, maybe you don't want to go into specifics, but are these things that have crossed your mind?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the counterplay of interrupting is not, and also as you said, it's not really working as well as we'd like. Obviously, anything that we're going to do on the redesign side of things is a larger discussion that we have to have internally. Sure. So I can't really commit one way or the other. But I think that it's worth having those conversations again. Something I'll bring up, and we really want to find the right solution for this. So, which not really saying anything, but
for sure.
At the same time, there's not really there's nothing that could be locked in at this time.
Yeah.
And so on the kind of the World versus World topic, and zooming out a little bit, World versus World is an interesting game mode to balance because of its slight sandbox nature, right? There's different ways you can approach the game, and obviously, as it stands right now, there are a few classes that maybe don't fit in so well into, I suppose, which the majority of World versus World gaming, which is relatively large play. We're talking like groups of 20 plus, 20, 30, 40, 50 even, right? The zerging with what's going on there. And you're going to see a lot of Guardians, a lot of Warriors, a lot of Scrappers, a lot of Necros, and all that sort of thing there. And maybe not
no Rangers.
Maybe not so much of a spot
Good.
for Rangers and Thieves and that sort of thing there as well. I suppose like the question within this is the kind of the vision for the balance in World versus World. Is there going to be kind of a replacement for something like Guardian, right? Like, is there going to be another stability class, right? To have that, is there going to be a different way you can run this? Because I mean, Guardian, it's been pretty much the only thing doing that since the start of the game. Is there going to be another option for that, or is that something that's potentially on the menu? Are classes like Mesmer can I get reinvigorated a little bit after they got annihilated?
Yeah,
with
not ideal for World versus World.
For poor old World versus World, poor old Chrono. I think the point is made there, or the question is posed. Where are we going with World versus World group play in the future?
I mean, as you said, it's an interesting problem, and I think especially in Zerg play, we see the most kind of dominant builds of any particular aspect are really the things that are the best. You have Guardian has the best stability. Let's bring that. Scrapper, you have the best cleanse. We need one of those. Get some boon rips in there, and then just have AoE damage as much as possible. Obviously, trying to give more classes more strengths in those same aspects such that they're viable, I mean, would be great. It's not an easy thing to do, and it's not necessarily something that we can do with splits, but increasing build diversity in WoW, I mean, across the game, competitive modes in general. Big fan of build diversity, and I'd love to see more opportunity for other things to exist in those roles, but it's not an easy problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just to sort of add to what Teapot mentioned or said, and this isn't necessarily a question or anything, but I mean, since the beginning of the game, there have been certain classes. I mean, there used to be the Gwen meta in core, which was Guardian, Warrior, Ellie, Necro, and it's it just seems as though there have always been certain classes that are much better at World versus World and organized play than other classes. And a lot of times you'll see Thief, you'll see Mesmer, even Ranger a little bit, only performing in very niche roles, and sometimes only because players are trying to force that to happen. And you've seen that pretty much throughout the extent of World versus World. That's never really changed. And obviously, you know, we sort of mentioned this before, stability, obviously extremely crucial to team fights and stuff in World versus World. And that's obviously a big reason why Guardian has been so good in for so long. But, you know, again, World versus World, or Guardian has been, I think, better in World versus World for a lot of other reasons as well. And it's always seemed like that. And so, you know, it is interesting that, you know, there's always been these classes that have never really dropped out of the meta in any way. You know, Necro has never really not been played. Guardian certainly has never not been played. Warrior, to most of the time, has pretty much never not been played. And it seems like Ranger almost never played, you know, and it's you know, just, you know, have you thought about trying to get it in any way? Are there any ideas you might have? Obviously, again, you have to keep in mind the how World vs. World is played, right? And that's another thing I actually wanted to bring up, but we can wait for that. But yeah,
So
that's just sort of.
the reason I laughed is because I was playing Jumpire Dating Simulator, and the Wovwa girl was a ranger, so I don't know where you're coming from.
That's true. You know what? I actually picked her, dude.
Yeah.
I'm ready for my date on Thursday, man. And you know, clearly I think I've been playing World vs. World wrong for years, because if Lila Cat can do it, well, then anybody can.
Did you get were you able to take the tier 3 keep, Roy? Did you manage?
Are you kidding me, dude? Screwzo is the greatest commander I've ever followed in this game, dude. No keep, no objective will not fall before his might.
But you were playing as Screwzo, right? So
yes.
You weren't following him.
Okay,
look, buddy, I've not played the game.
Get the typo right. Anyway,
no, you know what, CMC, you're absolutely right. I don't know what I was thinking.
It's like we've talked about. Like, the roles that you want for a Wolf Wizard are very specialized.
Yeah.
And Ranger doesn't really fit any of those roles, so it is very unlikely for it to be a desired class in the blob at this time. And it's definitely a question of, like, are there things that we could do to Ranger to bring it into a state that it can fulfill a viable wizard role?
Mm-hmm. So on that same vein, you know, World vs. World right now, you know, pretty much since HOT, the metagame has essentially been you play as a ball, right?
Yeah.
And you fight other groups as a ball. And obviously there's slightly, you know, slight variations. And, you know, as the meta has shifted, that has changed. But, you know, before HOT, you know, a lot of how you played was there were separate groups. You know, you had your melee group, you had your range group, and you had your focus party. And that really hasn't existed since HOT. And I think part of that is just because people kind of realized after HOT that it was just easier and better to play as just one single group. You know, you could coordinate damage better, you could coordinate single targets better. It was easier to support people on tag. And you know, in really big open field groups, you know, when you get up to like 40s and 50s and stuff, you can still see some range classes. Even rangers can be somewhat viable, you know, ranged elementalists. But, you know, for the most part, moving as a single group is just better. And I'm not necessarily saying that's bad, but, you know, do you kind of look at that sort of style of gameplay when you think about trying to balance classes in World vs. World? You know, do you think that that's fine the way it is? You know, are you trying to maybe shake that up, change it so that it's not just sort of a melee ball, or you know, how do you feel about that?
I mean, it's kind of like what I talked about earlier with PvP, that we don't really try to design into a particular style of gameplay, and the resulting meta is very much how the players are playing the game. And obviously there's going to be some balance aspects of these are the best classes, so it makes the most sense to play in a certain way. But in terms of like melee ball versus alternate ways to approach team fights, I don't lean any particular way. I'd like to see any number of styles viable, which is, I mean, this is the big class diversity, gameplay diversity problem that is kind of the always existing problem for balancing a game, is how do you get that? How do you get there? But that, I would say that is how realistic you want to consider.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we won't go there, but it almost seems like kind of like the best way to to address something like that would be to essentially have a new elite specialization or completely rework a trait line potentially, right? To do that, right? You almost need like a new version. You almost need like a new version of Ranger, right? I kind of thought like when I was kind of reading about Soul Beast for the first time, you kind of thought, oh, hang on a minute, this could be, I can see this, right? These stances, right? Like sharing that. Okay, this could maybe be something in World versus World, right? A bit of a different way of playing potentially. You take the Guardian away and you have that, but I think like something that kind of holds back a lot of classes is just like they don't really have like the complete package. Like, there's no weapon you could really take on Ranger that would be super helpful for you in a Zerg fight. I think Mesmer kind of suffers for that a little bit as well. You're kind of playing like, oh yeah, okay, right, I'm playing a Mesmer, but what you're really playing is you're playing Veil and Focus Pull, right? And then maybe Grabwell as well.
For about 3 years, Mesmer has existed as a basically 2-skill class, and it's kind of like, are you going to take an actual, are you going to take another player? Or are you going to take 2 skills, which are very powerful? And well, actually, you don't really even see Mesmer that much anymore, to be fair. But in general, yeah, it seems like a lot of classes are kind of taken for 1 or 2 skills, or well, in those niche roles, I suppose, specifically Mesmer. But, yeah.
And I think that is a more difficult thing to actually end up resolving, right? Like that's where you do need more significant reworks, and it's difficult to do with numbers, right? Like to do that there as well. But so obviously we won't talk about that because that's not allowed. But still, the idea is there, and I think that the potential is there. And I think it's clear that there is a certain goal to incorporate some of these classes somehow into the World versus World meta there as well, potentially in the future, and enable these different play styles, right? Maybe eventually it will be more of like almost like the vanilla style of being playing a little bit more cloudy and having thieves go in and stab people in the back and all that sort of thing, right? It's a possibility that sort of thing could return as well, all over there as well, and on the World versus World thing, look, okay, I'm sure that the chat, they're screaming for it. They want to hear about this stuff, guys, okay? They want to hear what's going on here, okay? Siege, arrow cards.
I was about to ask.
Yeah? You like that, Angel? You like arrow cards? Yeah? You enjoy that?
Yeah, I love arrow cards.
I assume we're going to be seeing buffs coming through on Siege there as well in the upcoming patch.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Roy said yesterday. He was asking for arrow card buffs. So.
Yeah.
I told you not to say that on stream. Oh no! Now the community is gonna know I love arrow cards, guys. I love arrow cards almost as much as Angeels loves anime. But honestly, in terms of specifically,
honestly, Siege has been a big feedback point since the February patch, and evaluating like Siege damage relative to player damage and relative to player sustain is obviously something
right
high on the list, I would say.
Do you think it's okay that Siege, or do you think Siege should hit? So I mean, mortars and cannons can hit, and obviously those are more stationary, right? They're fixed upon certain points on objectives and stuff. But they can still hit 50 people, and arrow cards can hit 25. And I think arrow cards were reduced from 50 to 25, a while back. There was a bit of a Siege pass. But I mean, do you think that there are things, do you think there should be things that hit that many people in World versus World? Because obviously, there's more people playing. Or do you think that that's sort of too much still, and should maybe be reduced or looked at or balanced,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different aspects of Siege that can be balanced. Just balance with damage, can balance with target cap, can balance. I guess those are the big ones.
Yeah.
Damage and the target cap.
Sure.
I don't lean into one or the other more. I think that's kind of a case by case, which makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
But there's definitely adjustments that can be made there.
Sure. And
how do you feel about the banners?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, banners seem to be pretty oppressive in fights a lot of the time, and I think they were primarily. Well, I don't know what the idea behind creating them were, but Dragon Banner, Turtle Banner, Centaur Banner, specifically Dragon Banner. Now it seems like they're mostly used as like an offensive tool in open field fights as opposed to just defending objectives. I don't know if that was the initial goal with it or not, but they are very strong, and yeah, maybe overtuned there too.
Yeah, I can't really speak to the original design for the banners because I wasn't there at the time. But I think that balancing banners and pretty similar to Balance of Siege. Definitely something that we need to look at.
Okay.
Dragon Banner in particular has been a big feedback point because it is a kind of offensive option.
Mm-hmm.
How much damage it deals relative to player skills is something to look at. We do want them to be strong. We do want people to bring Dragon Banner, but we don't want fights. Dominant option.
Yeah, I think with World vs. World, it is a really difficult thing because you want to enable the desire to use some of these tools, right? And make it feel like holding these objectives and having a defender's advantage and fortifying your location does have, it has some meaning to it, right? And it is something that you want to go for within the kind of like the larger macro game mode of World versus World. But you also want to make that kind of have some counterplay and be enjoyable to play against, because I think that's some of the things that sometimes it can be a bit frustrating to attack something like a tier 3 keep, and well, I mean, you feel like it's going to take you about 10 hours to get through, and I like, hey, look, I like a bit of realism, guys. I love it. We can do like a 3-month siege for the enemy garrison, but I think maybe it's a little bit too much sometimes there as well, with all that stuff. But
yeah. I agree.
Do you have a comment on that, Roy? Any further comment?
I try to avoid tier 3 structures as much as possible now.
It does feel like there is a massive defender's advantage, and there should be a defender's advantage, but not to the extent that there is.
I wouldn't even say a defender's advantage in the sense that they always will win, because I think that a lot of times there's actually sort of just a base attacker's advantage. But I feel for me personally, it just feels like nowadays, as opposed to before HRT specifically, it feels a lot less enjoyable to try and flip things, try and open up structures, get inside those structures, and then capture them, regardless of the defense capabilities, really. And I don't know if you have any sort of impact on that sort of balance design, because obviously that's not skills and stuff. But I don't know if you can speak to that at all. And if not, that's fine, of course, since I don't know. But it doesn't really feel enjoyable to do that at all to me anymore.
Yeah, I mean, tier 3, obviously there needs to be some reward to holding an objective long enough and getting it upgraded to tier 3, but this shouldn't feel unassailable. It should be something that you want to go take it because it is the kind of prime objective that is owned by the enemy team. Balancing that, it's not necessarily skills balance, but it is level balance, and it's
right. Okay.
Something we want to make sure. It's probably a little bit overtuned and leaning toward the defenders right now. It's something we've actually talked about a lot internally, and something that we'll continue to talk about. But we want to make sure that opening the map and seeing a pile of tier 3 objectives
jump maps
is not a jump map. Right? That is what we would rather avoid.
Right. And obviously, I have a bit of a biased viewpoint, and I completely accept that, because I'm not, there's a lot of people that prefer, defending stuff, and that's fine. That's
and they're weird people.
No. It's okay. I like fighting, right? And a lot of the times, if there's a group that's willing to fight outside of a keep or whatever, I won't fight. I won't go near the keep. I'll just fight that group. But again, like, just to sort of go back to, the more before HRT, vanilla. I think that fighting inside of keeps actually felt a lot more impactful, and it actually was a lot more enjoyable too. It felt like groups you'd really be fighting the group as opposed to the keep. And right now, it kind of feels like you're fighting the keep. With tactivators, with all the siege, mortars, cannons, AR cart, whatever it is. And it feels as though it's, again, you're not really fighting the group that's defending it. You're really fighting the keep itself. And I don't know how you feel about that, but again, it doesn't really, it's not enjoyable to me. And again, I accept that's biased viewpoint. Maybe that's how it should be to most people. I don't know, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that either.
I mean, the objective is always going to be part of the fight. We don't necessarily want it to be the dominating force of the fight, but in World versus World, it is very much the case that you are going to be fighting in these objectives. You're fighting players, but you have to care for the environment as well.
Sure, I think that should be yeah. I think that should be considered.
But your feeling of we're only fighting the objective is probably not what we want. Because at the end of the day, it is a player versus player.
Yeah.
Just with more interesting things.
And in terms of World vs. World gameplay as a whole, and I apologize if this is not something that you have any sort of direct correlation to. I this sort of feels like maybe not balance specifically, but it definitely affects fights. Skill lag is a very serious issue, and I think it is probably the single most detrimental issue for World versus World. I think I've talked to a lot of people, and most of them say that if there wasn't a skill lag, they'd probably play World versus World. But and again, like I said, I know that's not direct balance, maybe, but I don't know if that's any sort of thing that might be affected by balancing stuff, because I think in the past it's been stated that as more skills and more effects and stuff are added to the game, that will increase lag and stuff. I think that's been stated on the forums and stuff. So I don't know if you have any sort of insight on that or whatever, but it definitely feels as though it is the single most worst part of playing World versus World.
I'm not particularly an expert on skill lag, so I don't want too much into it. I think there are some amount of gains that can be done on the skill side, but it is less than it is not a major problem. I think. I don't know. I don't want to talk about it too much. I don't have a lot of visibility.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. For sure.
I don't understand our technical side of things very much.
It's okay. I don't either.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's
heard a lot of that about skill.
It's always been a really big problem, right? Like through every expansion. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it might just be a limitation of just games, right? That there's no game that can really seem to make this work just yet. There as well. It doesn't matter how many shiny Amazon servers you get, unfortunately. But
have you seen any World vs. World on the Chinese servers, TeaTime?
Oh, what? Yeah, dude, that stuff is like clean.
Do they have no lag?
They have no lag whatsoever.
Okay, well, okay, never mind that though, right? Never mind that. But you know what? You know where you don't get any skill lag, Roy? Okay, in World versus World, your favorite roaming, dude. Okay, roaming.
Yeah, and I suppose that's something that should be taken into consideration. And this is actually
that's where Rangers matter.
Yep.
I was. Well, yeah. I was gonna sort of ask as well. TeaTime mentioned earlier, in terms of like PvP balance, ATs versus ranked and whatnot. And I, where sort of do you look to try and decide what you want to balance for World versus World? Do you look? I'm sure you don't really look at roaming, but do you mostly look at just like big Zerg fights? What classes are mostly being used, the skills obviously being used or whatever. Do you look at where would you look for that?
I don't necessarily think we don't look at roaming, but I mean it's kind of the same thing I said with P, right? Where there's a bunch of different levels of the game mode, and we want to make sure that nothing feels too oppressive in any one of those things. At the same time, it's difficult to keep things relevant while addressing it in a particular case. But I think that's something we do with World vs. World as well, or at least want to do with World vs. World as well. Which doesn't really say anything, but it's the same answer as it would be, so.
Yeah,
sure.
And to a certain extent, I think a lot of the PvP changes could potentially kind of follow over into some of these roaming classes as well, right? I think it wasn't so long ago that people were enjoying the sweet embrace of getting one shot by Rangers, and well, it's kind of still happening, to be honest. But
what do you mean? Yeah. Not that long ago. Not that long ago, as in earlier today. Like, is that what you're referring to, TeaTime?
Okay. You know what I mean, though. There have been a few changes, but I think like some balance to roaming could almost be a side effect of some of the PvP balance changes to a certain extent, right? Because we do see PvP in World versus World, happening, under this, bracket. Like you have the PvE split, then you have the PvP and World versus World split, and I imagine that there will be some World versus World only changes as well. So that capacity is there to have. There are some, yeah. Like Mantra of Truth, for example, is a 3-way split. There's a fun fact for you. There are a few there, but I think that a lot of the stuff from PvP can also balance for for World versus World roaming there as well. But kind of for the question there, like is World versus World an area that could potentially be getting some of its own special changes, perhaps to Winds of Disenchantment, for example, and a bunch of other skills there as well? Like is maybe the power level needs to be even lower in World versus World because of the magnitude of how many players are clashing all at the same time, right? You're more of a lone soldier in the mist as opposed to one of a team of 5 in PvP. So like, is there going to be a different approach for World versus World balance as a whole? Like, could we actually see it diverge even from the PvP balance, or do they want to stay vaguely the same because of their comparative nature?
I think in general it's going to be a lot of the same, but at the same time we definitely want to do level specific changes where they make sense. Like as we're doing PvP specific changes, things that should only affect PvP, let's just do them in PvP. Things that should only affect WoW, let's do them in WoW. And there's definitely more things that pile on top in WoW as well. You have like food, you have higher stats on here, yada yada yada. The overall power level is definitely already higher there, and there's definitely going to be cases where we do need to make splits specifically for this world. That is definitely something.
You mentioned stats, and there are certain stat combos I think that have been pretty much only used right since HOT, and there's a lot of stat choices that you don't really see used as much anymore, pretty much ever. I mean, Minstrels is pretty much used on every single support class: Firebrand, Ellie, Scrapper, some Necro builds even, and you never really see any other form of any sort of like support stat option, and it's more or less similar for a lot of Connie builds. There's maybe 2 choices for power builds. You usually are just running Marauders. There's obviously some some variants there. You can throw in some Berserker trinkets or whatever. But there's really not a lot of stat options in World versus World, and a big part of I think what attracted people to the game mode in certain ways originally was as Teapot mentioned, sort of sandboxy, how you can kind of create builds. You can test more. There's a lot of theory crafting that goes into it, right? And that attracted a lot of people, and that's an interesting aspect of the game mode. And do you have any sort of thoughts on trying to bring more stat options into the meta? Or reduce, certain stat options that pretty much are exclusively used?
I mean, touching gear stats is not necessarily something that is on the table. It's a much larger question that kind of goes beyond even the competitive game modes. Like PvP does benefit from having amulets and stuff like that.
Right.
That system, not necessarily something we want to do for World versus World, but at the same time, adjusting the effectiveness of gear in World versus World, it is a very complicated problem that goes beyond just balance. So it's not something that can just happen.
Of course, yeah. And I assume your answer would probably be more or less the same, but I mean, it seems like 4 stat
options. Shout
options
out to the person in chat that said my webcam was picking up my mic, and all you idiots in the stream.
I just thought that's how you sounded, to be honest, dude.
I didn't point it out.
Look, I thought it was normal, dude. I was
going to say something at the beginning of the stream, but I didn't want to.
People messaged me saying, should he mention it to you?
Yeah, I didn't want to be like, hey, CMC, your mic is shit, dude. Like,
yeah, I mean, we didn't know.
I don't want to. I mean, look, man. I'm a streamer, dude. I can afford mics.
Whoa!
I can afford the high class mics,
Oh but, my goodness!
I mean, now you're using a headset mic, so
Calm down, right?
I don't even know that happened though. Like my default device is still my microphone, so.
But you probably have you maybe not Discord called before or something, and maybe you just automatically selected webcam.
Discord claims that my default is my mic, so I don't know. I just killed my mic.
It can be confusing. It can be a weird one right there, but it's all fixed now. Only about an hour in, guys. It's all good.
You sound like a new man.
So it was probably just the worst thing ever for the last hour.
You know what we should do? We should just start over.
Yeah, let's go again.
Let's end this.
Hey guys.
Yep. Yeah.
And then we can be 20 minutes late again. Yep. So we'll start in 20 minutes, and we'll just start over. We can watch the VOD back and
Yep.
just, read the questions. Yeah.
And just read it all out. That's what we can do. It's not a problem. I suppose, like, on this, and I'm not sure if you particularly have an input on this, of course. So, once again, it's not the end of the world if we can't talk about this. But is there going to be like a gradual reintroduction of different amulets that we've seen in PvP now that the balance has been adjusted a little bit? Like, I think in particular, the support amulets are looking a little bit sparse right now. In general, you see a lot of menace. You do see a bit of Sage, to be fair, actually on a fair few builds as well.
It's
but
not really support, though.
Well, I get it's more like a hype. I don't want minstrel amulet back. Okay, I don't want minstrel amulet. That's maybe a little bit too far.
I don't want mercenary amulet back.
Yeah. No.
Oh, a mercenary.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Could you imagine Condi Mirage with mercenary amulet?
That's nice. Yeah, let's go. That's what we want to see.
In terms of like amulet diversity, like something that I probably wouldn't want to bring back any of the ones that were removed because they ended up being very oppressive in situations. Something that we've thought about is bringing them back at like lower stats. Kind of weird. Like, instead of getting the full 3k from, say, Soldier's Amulet, it's going to give you fewer stats, but you do get that power, toughness, vitality combination.
Oh, so like Sully.
Kind of like Sully. I mean, this same idea where, except in this case, you would actually just get fewer stats from this amulet. So instead of like 1299, it would random number. It could be like 10. 750 or something.
Okay.
This is not necessarily something that's going to happen. It's just something that we thought about because I don't think there's anything wrong with having, say, Soldier's stats available. It's just the previous iteration of Soldier's Amulet was powerful.
And I presume that for World vs. World, it would be a little bit more difficult to implement a change like this, like to have a new stat type or a different stat type, a new rune or a new sigil or something like that, because it's intrinsically linked to the core game balance as well, right? Because World vs. World, you don't have this custom amulet system, custom gearing system like PvP. But is there a dialogue about adjusting stat types or adding new stat types into the game, or are they fairly set in stone with regards to something like World vs. World?
I don't have a lot of insight into that problem.
Okay.
I'll not say anything.
Yeah. I suppose then, in terms of runes and sigils, like, is that something that will be adjusted as the balance patches continue to roll on out as well for PvP? Because I think runes are very interesting, and particularly with some of the reworks, you have these quite interesting effects, right? Particularly on the 6 bonus. Well, I guess only on the 6 bonus, really, and all that sort of thing. So, are we going to have some more runes and sigils kind of potentially trying to enable a certain play style? Or is that something that actually is kind of worth avoiding? Like, do you not want to have like a build that only exists or is only like primarily enabled because of a certain rune? Is that something to avoid, watch out for?
I think runes are an interesting place to kind of have a build-defining thing attached. I mean, it's simply something we want to do more with Grandmaster traits, I would say. But runes are definitely an option for that type of thing. I mean, adding new runes is kind of in the same vein as adding new stat combinations, so it's not really something I have a ton of insight into. But having interesting runes is good, I think.
Okay. And well, that kind of covers a lot of the stuff we wanted to talk about, kind of in the generalities with both of the game modes. But there are a few points that I would like to have a bit of a discussion on there as well. Before we maybe move on to a few questions from the audience, don't worry, guys, we haven't forgotten about you. I haven't been ignoring you, right? Don't worry, right? Well, Roy has, but don't worry. We'll maybe see what we can do about a little bit later. But I'm very curious. Like, I've seen you. I've seen you in those ATs, CMC, spectating, having a look, right? Is that sort of thing a big part of where you kind of observe the balance of the game and what things might be problematic and what things are maybe undertuned there as well? Like, where does your data come from on evaluating the game's balance?
I'd say we have a lot of sources of data, and spectating AT is definitely part of that data. Talk with a lot of players, get their feedback. A handful of Discords that talk about PvP and World vs. World as well. get some feedback there. Read the forums, get some feedback there. We kind of just gather data from everywhere and then use that data to not necessarily drive our decisions, but there's some amount of that. But I use a lot of, especially like match win rates and stuff like that. We have a lot of data on that as well. I'll use that to kind of back up my own thoughts, or sometimes it's something to look into. If something has a very high win rate in, say, ranked, is there really a problem there? Not necessarily. There's not necessarily always a problem there. If we only balance stuff, ranked match win rate, we would probably nerf like Dragon Hunter in the next patch, which is something that if you told most people to play PvP, they would call you crazy.
Wait, does it have a really high win rate?
One of the
Well, when
highest
you're
win
Trap
rates
Cat.
in ranked.
How do you
Wait,
feel about
really?
Trap Cat?
Oh man, it's gonna be Trap Cat.
For Trap Cat, dude.
He simply, nerfed coming through, dude. You
So-
heard it here first.
So like I said,
Yeah.
data definitely is valuable, but it doesn't always give you the full picture. Player feedback is important. Obviously, playing the game is important. Watching other people play the game is important. There are very many factors that go into balanced decisions for sure.
Now, hold on. I remember you watching my stream and saying that you would never gather feedback from me.
Well, you have to consider the skill level of.
Wait, are you saying you won't duo with me, CMC?
Watching Syngener is maybe a little bit more valuable than watching Roy.
Whoa! Oh
Ouch,
my goodness. Okay.
Even Jimmy.
Well, that
Well,
is...
not unless you're looking to balance the bronze bracket, of course.
All right, Angels.
Angels, my goodness. Ouch. What a roast.
You know, I'm just glad you came by my stream at all. To be honest, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I like watching streams. I don't get to do that as much, but watching ATs, talking to people, and talking to people wherever, it's really valuable for sure.
okay, and on that note, if what would you tell the balance experts in chat? How would you tell them to respond? How should they have
They should shut up.
How should they have their voice be heard? What is the best place and the best approach to discuss the balance and post suggestions and talk about whatever they want to with regards to any class that they don't particularly like, or maybe they do like it and they don't think it's good enough? Like, how should the Guild Wars 2 community go about providing feedback to the balance?
I think in general the forums are probably the best place to go. Like, I read the forums a lot. After the patch went out, I read basically every thread in the forums for like every single post.
Wow, you must love reading.
Interesting adventure for sure.
Yeah.
I think that if you make a well-reasoned post on the forums, bring a lot of good thoughts, like that is a good area to. If you have me on Discord, feel free to ping me on Discord or ping me in the Discords that I'm in. That's also fine, but it's harder to track messages that way. I'm rather look at posts or documents or things like that, or having conversations like this.
Okay. Well, there you have it then. I think that kind of covers a lot of the general topics there, and I thought we could take a few questions here right at the end. So start thinking about your question now, guys, and we'll try and answer it. Right. Listen. Oh,
It's got to be serious questions.
okay.
Like-
One serious questions.
I'm open for memes questions as well.
There you go. Right.
Okay, serious / memes questions, but not asking for balance.
Well, I meant
Yeah.
serious questions like, what's Angel's favorite anime?
Okay, all right.
I am
Okay.
interested to know that actually.
Okay. Oh,
Wait, and
yeah.
Teapot's supposed to watch anime as well, right?
Yeah. I have no
Are we
choice.
having, like, a
I thought we were
poll?
just gonna all watch an anime together after this. actually.
Well, I mean, yeah, we can definitely do that. Exclamation mark weeb. Wait, what is this?
We're gonna
What is
hang out, right,
exclamation mark
guys?
weeb?
Like,
Oh wait,
Okay.
what is
Watch
this?
it,
This is why are you leaking this? This is
I mean,
this
this is
from
real.
today. That is actually
It's
real.
actually
To be
real.
fair, that is actually real. But yeah, so guys, questions regarding world versus world PvP competitive balance. Don't say why haven't you nerfed that? Why haven't you nerfed this? Right. Let's talk about have a few things about general topics. If you think there's something that we haven't talked about and kind of like the balance philosophy, or why is this part of the game like that, or why is that part of the game like that, right? That is what we want to talk about. Wait, Ben wants.
How do you feel about ArenaNet Ben P?
Oh, that's a good question.
So there's a bit of a problem where ArenaNet Ben P is my manager, and I can't really talk trash about him.
Yeah. Wait,
As
you
much as I'd
talked
like to.
you talked earlier about how you don't have as much time to watch streams as you want, but I figure you can just ask Ben because that's pretty much all he does, right?
I will not
Watch
comment on
that.
Okay. Well, okay. Here's interesting. I'll go. Don't worry, guys. I'll try and go through as many of these as I can. Just give me a ping, right? Ping at me or at Roy or at Angeels at CMC, right? So you can get a hold of us that way. But here's an interesting query here, and it's not specifically about balance, but it is about skills. There are a fair few skills that have some perhaps slightly unintended behavior or slightly buggy behavior. Are fixes for those kind of in the priority list for part of maybe the skills teams, the balancing team, or that sort of stuff? Is that likely to be fixed? I think Ajax gave us the example of Rush sometimes being a little bit unpredictable on Warrior.
Rush. That's a skill. Anyone who's played Greatsword Warrior, which includes I play a lot of Greatsword Warrior, so I feel the pain of Rush. Everyone knows what Rush did. Bug fixes are important, obviously.
He didn't like that answer.
Yeah.
Some fixes are easier than others.
Roy is gone once again. I think there we go.
Back.
That is a little bit unfortunate, but yeah, and of course, it's never as trivial as we might think when fixing some of these issues. So yeah, there you go. There's the answer to that one.
Well, I have a question for you, CMC.
Okay.
What are you playing most right now in PvP?
I've been playing a lot of things. I'm still playing like Core Warrior with tactics.
Okay.
Basically living in the pre-patch world where that was. I think it's pretty fun though.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
I've played some Revenant, played some. What else did I play? Mostly Revenant and Warrior since the patch. Tried to play DD early again. And
Condi Rev or Power Rev?
Not great. Not the worst.
I
play a lot of stuff.
No, the variety.
So warrior buffs are coming, Ajax. Don't you
Tactics
worry.
buffs are coming.
That's
okay?
what you can take from this.
Yeah, massive tactics buffs are incoming.
Strange conclusion to draw.
Yeah.
Feel free.
Yeah.
How do you?
If some warriors are safe.
How do you? This is actually a decent question. How do you feel about games that go to timer in PvP? I mean, do you think that's like kind of a sign of certain things being overtuned? Because do you think games going to timer is okay? Obviously, it means it was probably a pretty slow game. Or do you think that that's kind of a sign of something being not right with balance?
I think it can be some amount of balance problem and some amount just how the game plays out.
Sure. Yeah.
I assume it's moving, or it's looking at the idea of tanks are a little bit too strong right now, so fights take longer to end. If you're fighting on neutral point, it just takes forever. Which I think is a fair sentiment that we've seen a lot about, and it's something I touched on earlier, where we're trying to find the right balance of defense relative to the current state of offense. I don't have a problem with games going to timer in general, as long as it's if you could watch a really good back and forth game, also go to timer, just because there's a lot of decaps. There are different ways to go to timer than just fights never end on a neutral point. So I'm not opposed to them in general, but
okay, yeah.
If tanks are too strong, causing games to go to time, then yes, that is a problem. And we've actually looked at the average match length since the patch, and it's up a little bit, and I've definitely seen some games going to timer. I don't think it's horrifically bad, but maybe slightly more prevalent than.
Okay. And kind of on well, I suppose like maps and kind of the PvP game itself, how much does like secondary objectives and almost like map architecture factor into balance, right? Like, we often see certain teams will in ATs, and especially in the monthly, they absolutely groan when they see Temple, right? Because they know they're going to have a very, very rough time there because of their lack of mobility, right? Or inability to handle all the different objectives simultaneously. Is that something that is considered during the balance process?
I think different maps being more favorable to certain team comps is kind of interesting. Like, we don't want it to be the case where there's only one style that you can play on a given map, but leaning more toward favoring roamers versus favoring bunkers map to map. I don't think it's really a big issue. But in the case that there's only one relevant way to play on the map, that is something that we can look to address on a map level for sure.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. It is, I think it's interesting, and it's also a good way to, in a way, balance the game, right, and enable certain playstyles, or at least label them more there as well. An interesting question here regarding how different conditions are evaluated here. For example, we have a lot of, there's a fair amount of weakness being prevalent in the game, and also vulnerability being stacked quite hard as well. And when, on the boon side, you have kind of their correspondent ones with might, being perhaps a little bit, overvalued and not being able to stack as much. Like, what is the true nature of that? Is it vulnerability and weakness perhaps being undervalued currently, and will that be toned down, or will we see a slight uptick in some of the positive boons that kind of got slapped pretty hard in the previous balance patch?
I think weakness is probably something that we could bring down in certain, like, we still want good weakness skills to exist. We don't want weakness to be all over the place, and we brought it down a little bit in the 225 patch, and I think there's still some more work to do on that side of things. Vulnerability, I like vulnerability. It's something that you stack on someone and then everyone piles on, you get a big payoff, and it's a way to still output a lot of damage even though we brought damage back. We want to have those moments where you can get the high might stacks for a little bit of time, get the high vulnerability stacks for a little bit of time, capitalize off that. But if you don't get followed through, then you're going to have a lower damage potential.
Okay.
I mean, the minutia of getting the perfect balance of what those durations are, what those stacks are, is always going to be something that we want to look at. But in general, vulnerability is a good condition, I think. And weakness is also a good condition. It just can't always.
Yeah, for sure. But go ahead, Roy.
A bit of a world versus world question here. How do you determine or look at like NPCs in world versus world? Whether it's things that you can rally off of in world versus world, or just keep lords and whatnot. Because I don't believe that their health was looked at all when the damage was reduced in world versus world. So it might take a bit longer to kill them. Do you think about those at all, or are those not really relevant to any sort of decisions?
No, that's definitely things that we think about. We did think about adjusting Lord health with the patch, but sometimes we just want to see what happens as a result. Like, obviously, it's going to take a little bit longer to kill the Lord. It's going to be a little bit more favorable to the defensive team coming to reinforce, but we wanted to see how the play around that happened without adjusting it preemptively, I guess. And that's something that we'll do sometimes. Is some things are going to be potentially overtuned or seen as problematic at its face, but we want to see how that actually plays out, because there are opportunities for. I mean, the Lord health is not necessarily something that you have an opportunity to play around, but how that dynamic changes the gameplay is something that we wanted to see for adjusting that. But it is definitely something that can be adjusted.
And here's an interesting one, actually. And this is I should have brought this one up. I meant to talk about this. Combos. Right, like the combo system.
I want to talk about that too.
The combo system is one that has perhaps been gathering dust to a certain extent. We do see
blasting stealth.
some classes utilize it. Yeah, we have Thief utilizing a lot of stealth. We have stuff like Hollowsmith using water fields to sustain itself, and of course the infamous Water Weaver also doing similar stuff there as well, and even regular Weaver, the more aggressive Burn Weaver as well. But a lot of combo finishes are maybe a little bit lackluster with how the balance of the game there, and I think a lot of people kind of miss it in world versus world to a certain extent as well, right? There's no more put big water, blast the big water field there as well. Are combos something that the team is looking to maybe make a bit more impactful and a bit more worth playing around in a more like dynamic sense within the fight as well in both of these competitive game modes?
Yeah, I mean, obviously some combos are a lot better than other combos. That is less of a balance topic, so I couldn't really tell you much about that. But like blasting Waterfield is interesting, blasting Firefield is interesting. Like the places where the combo system does well, I think, are interesting play moments, and it's just a question of yes, many combo interactions are less valuable than others, which is kind of how it's been.
Is that something that you would like to see change, like to make, utilizing a combo, like get those burning bolts maybe a little bit better than 1 second of burning?
I mean, it would be nice if combos were kind of on a similar level, but at the same time, I can't really.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's fine. Okay, and here's one that I think people are going to be interested in. How do you feel about stealth and stealth uptime in general? Particularly on, I imagine, particularly on sort of like Shadow Arts. Thief is probably the topic there as well. But I suppose stealth in general as a concept within PvP and World versus World.
Oh, it's pretty strong. I mean, stealth is always going to be a balance between like how long can you stealth. I think the biggest issue we run into stealth is the case of I can stealth around a point, and then you have to be concerned for my backstab, but I'm already halfway across the map by the time I stealth it. You just got destroyed with not a whole lot of counterplay because you have to play around two things that are very different because you don't have a lot of insight into where a player is given stealth. So it's a lot of managing durations, I think.
Okay, but do you think stealth is kind of, well, I mean, Tal just put it strongly. Is it something that's good to have in the game, like to have that slight unknown about what this card's doing, a little bit of mind games there as well, because just that you can kind of play around, right? You can say, oh, the thief's coming for you, right? You can jump up on terrain, right? You can to a certain extent play around it. Is that something that you think is promoting almost like like the big macro team coordination thing as well with some of this with some of the stealth there and the interactions there between the players? Or is stealth something that will probably end up getting toned down a little bit, so it's more of like a utility and less of a, it has a bit more counterplay to it. It's a bit more interactive.
I mean, I can't really tell you much about the future of stealth because that's very much a skill design choice as balance. It's not like splits we're going to manage durations as we need.
Fair enough.
I can't really tell you much about how the direction of stealth.
Yep. Okay.
How do you there's did you want to say something else?
Oh yeah, you go.
Okay. So someone asked, right now in World vs. World you can only one person rallies off of a downstate, but in PvP you can have multiple people rallying off of a downstate. And do you think that at any point we might see only one person rallying in PvP, or is that sort of there to stay?
I mean, it's a possibility. I'm never going to say nothing's completely off the table, but I don't think that's necessarily as big of a problem in PvP. Obviously, it's a huge swing if you do get into that situation where you have multiple people down and you get one kill rallying two people. Pretty big blowout. I don't know. It's something to keep an eye on and evaluate, but it doesn't seem like too big of a problem to me right now.
Okay.
PvP.
Cool. With the like, obviously the 225 balance patch, it was a very reactive balance patch, like kind of all the build up of power creep we've had over the years. When do you think we're going to start to see more like, changes where you're maybe like testing stuff out or pushing certain different play styles or stuff like that with the balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely something that we want to look into. Definitely looking at things that are underperforming. What can we do to make them more valuable? At the same time, we're always going to be looking at stuff, and if there are needs to make things further, we also want to bring up the things that aren't relevant. And that's definitely more of a calculated, let's figure out a plan for that. And then let's ship a balance patch that adjusts all.
Okay, hang on. Let's see what else. What else have we got here, guys? I know some people want to talk about the visual clutter in the game. That is not really something that we can talk about here, unfortunately. I know you guys love
How many infusions do you have, CMC?
I don't have any.
Well, keeping it clean. Keeping it clean.
I don't really play PvE very much. I'm not like Angeels PvE. Stick to my competitive game modes. Don't have a lot of opportunity. Get those other rewards.
I like that, a pure PvP approach.
That's good. That's very, very good.
I mean, listen, buddy, how else am I going to get my legendary trinkets, huh?
You know what I want. You know what? Here's a good one. Okay, here's a fun one. Some elite specializations have been getting some downsides, some little drawbacks for a while. Is that eventually going to happen to all of them? And are there any in particular that you see as like maybe not having quite had their just desserts just yet? I think Firebrand kind of comes to mind there to a certain extent with things that might need a bit of a drawback. But is there any, is that something that is going to be there? And also kind of on the other side of that to kind of get these two things into into one question here. Are kind of core classes, core specializations kind of maybe going to get a bit of a nudge in the same way that Revenant did, right? For example, like Core Revenant recently got its the F2 skill, right? As opposed to, it didn't used to have that, right? To kind of differentiate it from having something that Herald doesn't, right? Like you have to give up that ability to take Herald or Renegade, of course, trade out those abilities. What's going on with the core spec and elite spec action and dynamic there?
Yeah, I mean, trade-offs are definitely something that we want to make sure for elite specialization. And I can't go into too many details.
Your mic's cutting out a little bit, by the way.
Mic sucks, of course.
It's just cutting out a little bit. I think maybe you need to move it a little closer to your mouth or something.
One moment.
I mean, he did say to tell him.
Yeah, you guys should tell me these things. I haven't streamed for like a year and a half. I don't know anything about.
Time to get back into the scene.
Could you imagine that chat though?
Yeah,
I definitely should have streamed the Empire Dating Simulator, but I
yeah. I mean, that's the number one thing to stream right now. That's what you want to see. Roy's played it. Mella's played it. You played it, Angels?
Mella
of course I haven't.
Wait,
Mella does nothing but play it.
Why haven't you played it, Angels?
Unironically, it's a good.
Because I don't need a dating simulator.
I do. See, it's the only thing I have in my life, actually, at this point.
So. Oh, no.
Okay. Hopefully this doesn't pick up too much random noise, but it should be better now.
Yeah, it seems pretty good.
What was the question? I don't even remember.
He was talking about, like,
core.
Yeah,
just
core.
Like standard gameplay.
Yeah. So just stuff like, the...
trade-offs, yep.
Yeah, the trade-offs, yeah.
So, I mean, I think trade-offs are important. In some cases... And this is very much a question for the skills team and how they want to address these things. But like in the case of Revenant, they went with the F2 option for Core Rev instead, because then you do have the trade-off between Core Rev and Herald is you have an F2 for Core Rev, you have an F2 for Herald. Whereas something like, any of the other ones, like Berserker, you don't have your F1 anymore, is very much a stricter trade-off, I guess. But trade-offs are important for elite specs. I don't have a lot of much to say about what future trade-offs are coming or what needs trade-offs. It's not really my domain, but I think that we are continuing to add trade-offs as are missing.
Okay. And oh no, I had something. No, I was too busy listening. No,
I've seen one here. What does CMC stand for?
CMC is just my initials, actually. It's not anything too in-depth or crazy.
Okay, there we go. Let's see. Oh, hang on. Someone wanted to know what the highest win rate in ranked was. Can you tell us that, or is that top secret?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I could look it up, but that's a pain in the ass.
Okay. Well, there you go.
I mean, to do like right now, I could do it, but I don't really want to. I have to like remote into
Ben,
my
get
work
on
machine.
that.
I don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
Core Ranger is pretty strong. Dragon Hunter is pretty strong. those are the big two I remember. I would say Hollow
Dragon
Smith
one-
is up there for sure.
The Dragon
Core
Hunter one
Guardian actually
surprises
up there
me.
as well.
Ajax is trolling, dude.
There are a lot of things that have pretty good ranked win rates that don't necessarily point to the build being
Yeah.
a problem either. It's just a question of like, I don't know. There's a lot to think about when looking at high win rates.
Of course, indeed. Which classes can we expect trade-offs on?
The Dragon Hunter thing isn't even low elo. Filtering by like platinum above matches, Dragon Hunter win rate is still very high.
It's because Trapcat, man. It's Trapcat, dude. He's simply too powerful.
Yeah, I think when you look at your Dragon Hunter stats, you probably need to realize it's one person, and that's Trapcat, just always winning. He's just a god gamer.
You never know.
Yeah.
Have we got any other questions in the chat, guys? Because I think we have discussed a whole lot today. Have you got something, Roy?
Yeah, well, and so obviously, the last pass we saw Soul Beast specifically change pets, Ranger pets change, right, with Soul Beast specifically. Do you think that pets in general are too strong on Rangers right now?
You saved me, Roy. That's what I wanted to ask about. My man. Just about AI in general. But sorry.
Right, yeah. No, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously, AI in general. We have stuff as we talked a little bit about.
Are you skipping anime-related questions?
What?
I'm not. Although if I saw an anime-related question, I probably wouldn't even know what it was.
Look, I will. Well, we'll talk. Look, we can do the anime question.
We should finish up the Guild Wars 2 talk, and then we can go into the meme conversation.
Yeah. Okay. We can do a few memes
can do
after we
that for a
talk
while,
about Guild
actually,
Wars 2. Okay. We can do a bit of memeing,
But yeah,
a little bit of memery.
So AI stuff. So obviously, you got Ranger pets. You've got the summons on Renegade, minions on Necromancer. Are there any sort of thoughts on that? Because maybe some are too strong, maybe some aren't good enough. Maybe the design of them are not necessarily good enough. Although again, that's maybe not balanced. But Thieves Guild is another one. Yes, Warband support on Char, although you can't use that in PvP. But yeah.
Is Warband support broken in World vs. World, Roy? Is that what you're getting at?
Yes.
It is.
Yes, it's even stronger than wins. It needs to be changed.
I mean, if you think about it, okay, you got a 40-man group, and then you summon your warband. Like, how many?
Dude, me and my warband just chilling on a border, dude. All right.
Yeah, everyone runs it. Then you can turn a 50v50 into a 150v50.
If skill lag wasn't an issue before, it will be now. Let me tell you. But yeah, no.
Yeah,
so
I mean, AI in general,
AI stuff.
like Ranger pets, there are definitely some Ranger pets that are probably a little bit overtuned right now, and I say a little bit overtuned because I don't like to say nonsensically hyperbolic things, but I think like there's definitely things that need to be adjusted on Ranger pets. Some of that could be on the health side. Some of them just do too much damage for sure. It's a delicate balance to making sure that these things, at least on the health side, like making sure that being able to pressure out a bird, I think, is necessary because the bird should do a lot of damage. Whether the bird does too much damage right now, maybe it does, and that's something that we didn't do a huge pass on for the 225 release. So I think that there's more to look at with Ranger pets for sure.
Would you consider doing something similar with what you did with Soul Beast with the other specializations of Ranger, or do you think that's just a Soul Beast thing in terms of pets?
What do you mean? It's just the no pet swap thing, or?
Yeah.
I think that I mean that's very much the Soul Beast trade-off that was added,
Okay.
so I don't think it would happen for other non-Soul Beasts.
Oh, so do you consider that the trade-off for Soul Beast?
Yeah, I think that was the goal of that change, was to be the Soul Beast trade-off.
Okay, yeah, to reduce the versatility of the class to a certain extent, right? So you can have to pick your pet wisely and specialize a little bit more there. This might not be one that we can talk about here, but what is the kind of goal for the cadence of these large balance changes, and can we expect to see a lot of kind of little mini hot fixes in between these patches, maybe mid-season or after the monthly AT, right? That sort of thing. What can we expect in terms of balance timings going forwards?
Yeah, I mean, one of our goals with balance is to not necessarily be tied to any given release, and if there are things that are overperforming, we want to be able to step in and get some shaves in, kind of outside of the usual ban. This is kind of, we've already done this with the initial changes for what did we nerf? Firebrand, Condi Herald, and Core Necro. We did that like a week and a half after the 225 patch, which is like crazy. It was like a weird hotfix timeline that probably never done before. And then the Soul Beast changes came like pretty out of band as well. Like we just want to be able to make the changes that we need to. Things like reevaluating the stuff I talked about earlier with like trying to bring up underperforming things. That's going to be more reserved for like a specific balance update, but reacting to the meta and fixing problems as they exist is kind of when we can, we want to do them. And in particular, we wanted to. I personally wanted to watch some of the initial rank data come in and watch the monthly tournament, which is why there were no changes in the previous balance patch. But we're starting to get some good data there, so I think there are some more changes that can be coming sooner rather than later for sure.
Okay.
All right. Do any of you guys have any other questions? Any burning desire questions you want to throw?
I don't know if I can ask it on stream, but
Oh, okay. Right,
wait
I
for the
see.
stream to turn off.
Yeah, all right. Well, we can certainly do that later. But in that case, guys, have you got any other questions that we can do a little bit memey? Okay, right, a little bit meme. And you know what? I guess we can kind of open that and we're right. Okay, look, I said I'd do this, guys. I'm going to say this on stream now. I said at $8,000 for the prize pool of Masters of the Arena, I would watch an anime. And to that,
Watch Attack on Titan. It's really good.
CMC, what anime would you recommend we watch?
Recommend him the trashiest, weebiest one. And then I think to add to that, he's got to do like a 10-minute review of it.
All right, chat. Wait, so what's the do we have any restrictions here? Or is there like
no
episode,
restrictions?
Well,
No
I mean, like it can't.
episode restriction? You need like
I'll
12,
do like
24.
I'll do like 10 or 12. I'll do like 10 or 12, right? I won't do like
Restricted to
100,
12,
right?
12
Yeah.
only. That's pretty nonsense.
Yeah.
Every Dragon Ball Z iteration ever.
One Piece, it's only 900 episodes or something.
Yeah.
Oh my,
And you have to read the manga.
oh my goodness, that's pretty intense.
I don't know if you're gonna limit it to 13 episodes. I think we need to further. It's a really tough problem. But I think chat can definitely agree that School Days is a quality option.
School days.
Oh yeah, School Days.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. Okay, right.
I mean, the title sort of gives you an idea. I think, Teapot. You know,
Yeah.
school, education, learning probably is what the focus is of that anime. Is my guess.
I will say that School Days is the only anime
Yes.
where I've literally hated every single character.
Wait, what? Wait, no. Oh no.
High distinction in my anime list.
Oh my
There are
goodness.
0 redeeming qualities.
Yeah.
Except the end was great.
Wow.
for that.
Okay, I see how this
Because
one's
it
going.
ended, or
I'm getting thrown under the bus here. Okay. But
I mean, did you expect anything else, really?
Well,
Don't watch School Days for the record. There's there's better.
Okay. All right then. So guys,
One more thing,
have you got any?
I think you should consider extending your limit to like 24 episodes. So
Oh yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I'm not unreasonable.
watch
guys,
Attack on Titan.
okay?
Do
Yeah.
you like Attack on Titan, CMC?
yeah,
Did you like it?
it's all right.
No. It's the only anime
Not
I've
really
seen.
my-
It's the
not
only one I
really
can
my
recommend.
genre.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
You're more about School Days. Yeah.
I mean, not School Days, but you know, Slice of Life is good stuff.
Okay. Will you raid with Mela, CMC?
I mean, I'm now an expert raider after playing Gempire Dating
Oh,
Simulator.
right, yeah.
Ooh,
Oh,
I've learned all of the mechanics
Nice.
for all the fights
that's
to get
big.
that perfect.
Yeah, you got to get those perfects. You do. You
So,
absolutely do.
Clearly, don't you need like don't you need like PvE masteries to do raids though? Like, I don't even know if I could.
There's some that I
Do all
think
the
you need,
mechanics.
you need gliding for in some, right?
Ah,
But
they're pretty
I have,
optional.
like,
you can
tier
you
one
can portal,
gliding.
yeah.
you
and
can
you can
get
just-
around.
I don't
it.
have anything else.
You can get around it
Who-
if you need to.
Who's the best Guild Wars 2 player, Dana?
Ooh,
oh.
The best Guild Wars 2 player?
at
Is it
arena,
you?
yeah.
Just at ArenaNet? I mean, it's me.
That's what I thought, yeah.
But it's just how it is.
Yeah.
We
do you
love
think
to
that
see it.
Do you think that Ben should give up dagger focus on Ellie and play
What do you
staff?
mean? Dagger
I mean,
focus is...
Tempest is really good. Oh, Tempest is also high win rate ranked as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, makes more sense.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I know this was more before when dagger focus was not used at all, but
If there was okay what's a balance change in another game you would do if you had absolute balance control of another game you play? Which game would you change, and what would you change?
I don't even play that many games, so I don't have a good answer.
That's a good answer in itself. Loyal to Guild Wars 2. I like
Maybe
that.
the girls are easy to get in Gempire, you know?
Yep.
I think it was a little bit. The difficulty was there was not a lot of difficulty, to be fair, in Gempire.
Yeah, it was too easy. Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. That's good.
Pretty straightforward for the most part. Like anyone who's played visual novels, obviously, is going to perfect everything.
Oh.
The mechanics aspects of Guild Wars 2.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
Not a difficult game, which is fine. The ending was really good, so.
Yeah. Okay.
I recommend chat should go play.
Oh, yeah.
Gempire Dating Simulator.
I wholeheartedly would recommend that game as well. It's definitely worth it. But yeah, I think. I think we've kind of answered these questions about other MMOs there as well. I believe that actually kind of wraps things up here a little bit overall. So
relatively short time.
Yeah, right. You know, it's about 2 hours.
Why so short? I was expecting this to go for like 12 hours. For the
12
record,
hours.
so.
Oh no, that's just.
I mean, we could break it down if you
I'm
want.
actually kind of
CMC.
disappointed. I'm not gonna lie.
Whoa.
I mean, we can start really getting into the nitty gritty of every single class if you want to. You know?
Oh yeah, you want to address every balance complaint the chat has? You know, we can do that if you want. You know, we can go there.
All right, chat.
Listen, okay, these guys. There are like 3 guys who've been spamming the word chrono for like 20 minutes now. Like,
yeah, chrono. Yeah, the whole requiring clones to shatter is pretty terrible.
No, it's great. CMC, if you had to use one word for chrono, what would you use to describe your opinion on chrono right now? What would you use? Any word.
I don't have a good answer for that. I'm not much of a one-word descriptor. Like that's
Okay,
not really,
all right.
Not really my style.
Well, for the 3 of you in chat, there you go.
Yeah.
It is indescribable. There you have it, my friends. But well, I don't know. I don't really want to get into. I tried to dodge a lot of the specifics during the TeaTime because you can get trapped in those black holes forever, right? So look. Just, we tried to talk about some of the general stuff here as well. But yeah, I believe that will just about do it. I want to give a massive shout out to CMC for
thank you very
hopping
much.
on TeaTime here with us there as well. And of course to the partner program for facilitating this. So yeah, thank you so much, my friend, for joining us here. It was an absolutely fantastic discussion, and we really appreciate you making the time to come and talk to us and the community. I want to see some claps in the chat, guys. Okay. And also, I just want to say this, guys, as an unofficial thing here as well, CMC is now responsible for the Ayaya emote being enabled in the chat there as well. So, the weebs, you can thank him there as well. Yeah. You can do that. But
you guys
also have
10 minutes to spam
Weird, which is an excellent emote. It's definitely on the level of Weird Champ.
Yeah, Weird Champ is
What's your favorite Twitch emote?
I really like Weird Champ, actually. It's one of my favorite Twitch
That's
emotes.
a good one.
I'm not sure I have that one here, actually. I'm not sure I have Weird Champ.
You don't.
Yeah. Oh.
Wow, imagine not having Weird Champ.
Oh, no.
I think I have Weird Champ, but I'm not sure.
Honestly, Teapot is just so behind on all these emotes, man. He needs to get like someone to come in and just do it for him. Like,
that's
he's
true.
hopeless.
That's true.
He's hopeless.
Well, the thing is, look, I've got loads of good. I don't have enough space, man. Like I mean, come on, there's loads of good ones we got here. We just don't have enough. There's not enough room for all these emotes.
There's too many good emotes, honestly.
Yeah, it's true. It's absolutely
there are
true.
A lot of good emotes.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it a lot. And of course, to my wonderful guests here as well, Angeels and Roy. Do you guys want to briefly explain who you are in case anyone in the chat doesn't know who you are, Angeels? What's going on, man?
Oh, okay. Putting me on a spot like that.
Oh, yeah. I'm doing it.
So I stream twitch.tv/Angeels with 2 E's. Very exciting stuff. I sometimes smash my desk, which is great.
Sometimes?
Shut up, buddy.
Up.
And I also create and curate the Gods of PvP.net website. So yeah, if you need help with PvP, don't go to that website, I guess.
Well, there you go. And we also have Roy here as well. You know, he rage quit this discussion a few times. That's why you saw him leave the call. I do apologize for that, guys. You know, he is a bit like that. He's a bit of a...
He wouldn't tell me if Winch is getting nerfed, so I'm out.
He's done, dude. He's out immediately there. But yeah, tell us what is going on with you, my friend.
So just to reiterate what Teapot said again, yeah, CMC, thanks so much for coming, dude. It's really cool to see this, and yeah, obviously the partner program allowing us to have this. It's awesome. Hopefully we can do something again like this in the future.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have like the full anime discussion next time.
Yeah, next week we can just talk about animes the whole time. I mean, it'll really just be you and Angeels discussing your favorite animes, but you know, because me and Teapot
Angeels needs to play the dating sim, and then we can talk about that next.
That's true. He does need to play it. Angeels, we demand a full playthrough on stream.
Dude, look,
100,000 subs.
To like get all the endings, right? Like you've only played.
I don't know if I'll do it on stream. I don't know. Did you watch me play it, CMC?
I didn't watch that much, but I saw that you were playing it.
Okay. Well then, I mean, if you came to stream, I'll play it for you. But otherwise, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I don't think CMC streams anymore. But you can still go follow him on Twitch.
My last stream was, I think, 14 months ago.
Nice.
So
okay, so we're pretty
close. So tomorrow then.
Pretty consistent streamer. You can buy him rice. I think you like rice, right, CMC? That's
you cannot buy me rice anymore, actually.
Oh, that's too bad. That used to be your description. That was cool. I like that.
Once upon a time, I took donations, but I don't take donations anymore.
Okay, fair
enough.
I
never stream anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I guess you don't have to, but you can if you like, anyways. But yeah, as Angel said, twitch.tv/Angeels with 2 E's. And of course, godsofpvp.net is the place to get your meta builds for PvP.
Twitch.tv/Roy__.
No, so make sure you go to that Twitch, give him a follow. Shut up. And you can follow him on Twitch. You can go to his website. You can support him there because he's a great streamer and an even better guy. And you should definitely be supporting him. And you should also be equally supporting Teapot at twitch.tv/MightyTeapot, which I think is here where you're watching the stream. He streams every single day, more or less, except for, I guess, Wednesdays now, which is good. I'm glad you're taking a day off. But he puts his life into this game and his energy into this game and his
not enough sleep
blood, sweat, and tears and no sleep into this game. So make sure, yes, I'm a simp. I am a simp. Yeah, it's fine. Make sure you support him as well. Give him the follows, give him the subs he deserves. Obviously, sort of hard times right now with the quarantine, but fortunately, I have a great solution for you, which is that if you have an Amazon Prime account, you can get
Teapot, can you
and that allows you
Roy for a second,
to sub
no. I'm gonna boost him
Twitch every month. So
I
make
need
sure
you to just mute him for a
give
second
everyone
because
Angels be quiet. I'm gonna mute you
because Roy needs massive
and
support.
Finally, guys, make sure that you are supporting the Masters of the Arena tournament, which is happening June 5th, 6th, and 7th. We just reached over $10,000 for that, which is insane. All crowdfunded. So huge shout out to everyone who's been donating and supporting the tournament in various different ways. But make sure you're supporting that, guys. We have the next April and May monthly ATs, which are going to be the qualifiers for those. Teapot will be streaming those, of course. And so make sure you check them out.
And so will Roy.
The tournament, support the tournament. And yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Support the boys here, Angeels and Teapot, and of course every other awesome Guild Wars 2 content creator. They deserve it. And yeah, again, big shout out to CMC for coming out and listening to me drone on because I'm annoying as fuck. But hey, there you go. Thanks.
Yeah, that's true.
I like that. Yeah, thanks a lot, Roy. And
cheers. Stay hydrated.
I can't do much of a better job than that, but yeah, follow this stream if you liked it. I'll try and get more stuff going like this so we can have interesting discussions about the game. I run this podcast whenever there's something good to talk about, really. Talk about every aspect of the game. I stream PvP, World vs. World, raids. We do it all, guys. Okay, we do it all. So follow, subscribe, and follow everyone here. And of course, stay tuned for Guild Wars 2. CMC, do you have any final words or messages, words of wisdom you would like to impart to the viewers before we, before we raid Valen, I think. There we go. So do you have any final words for the chat?
Valen.
Wait, is Valen even streaming?
Yep.
Are we going? Are we about to take a nap?
He's just...
Seems to just been up.
I don't have a lot to say. It was great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I mean, it's fun to just talk about the game. It's something I enjoy doing, probably a lot more than some other people. I think everyone here likes to talk about the game a lot, but it was a lot of fun. Happy to be here. I'll have to do it again sometime.
Hey, thank you.
Spam your IAs in chat.
It's a spam IAI in chat. Well, you heard the man, guys. You heard him. All right, let's
Thank
get
you,
to...
CMC. As we agreed, now I know who to ban.
Yeah. Well, once again, thank you. I really, really appreciate you coming on and to the partner program there as well. So, guys, I've got a mission for you. We're all going to go to Valen, and you guys are going to start a really intense balance discussion. Is his chat, okay? It's perfect, okay? It's perfect. Let's go, okay? Get in there and talk about the balance. Continue that going there. So say hi to Valen for me.
Nerf steel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Talk about nerfing steel. That's big, actually. Make sure you do that. But yeah,
like that one.
That is it for us today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Follow everyone. Get in the game. Start playing PvP. It is a fantastic time to be into competitive in Guild Wars 2 right now. So get on it. Get in there. Get that rating. Get those ATs. Support the Master of the Arena. Support the ATs. Support the game. All that sort of thing. Thank you all very much for watching. Enjoy the next stream, and I will see you guys around. We all will see you around in the future. Good night, my friends. See you later.
See you, kids.